Hey, what is up guys? So we are going to be doing a deck profile on a very budget-friendly deck using only the cards out of the Saga of Blue Eyes White Dragon. So a lot of players have asked me to make a super budget-friendly deck, and this is going to be for you guys. If you only have access to picking up 3 of the Saga of Blue Eyes White Dragon structure decks, this is going to be a build that you can have some fun with. I've done some playtesting with the deck, and it's not going to be the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! It'll be a fun deck, and you can kind of understand how the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Works, and you can pull off some decent combos and bring a big 3000 beater out on the board, and sometimes this card can actually win games on its own. And if you protect this card or they can't get over it, sometimes you can just win the game. But let's go ahead and jump right into the deck profile. I'll explain all the choices and a few of the little combos you can do in this deck as we go along. So let's jump right into it. So, first off, 3 Alexander Dragon. He's pretty much the only card that you can normal summon right off the bat, and you have a decent, monster with a decent amount of attack on board as well. Next up, you have 2 Blue Eyes White Dragons, and the reason why I think 2 is good is because if one of them gets Bottomless Trap Hole, or they steal it with something like Big Eye, or they do something to your Blue Eyes, they banish it, or they take control over it, you need another one because otherwise your maidens will be dead, and you'll have a lot of other dead cards in your deck. So I think 2 is a great number. Next up, 2 Flammable Guard. He's just another tuner, plus he has a decent amount of defense, and he's also a card that you can get rid of with cards of consonants if you don't like him and you happen to have a cards of consonants in your hand. Next up, 1 Divine Dragon Apocryph. So this card is basically used just to discard one and then add something like Alexander Dragon. You probably don't want to add like a Blue Eyes to your hand because this card probably not going to be doing so good in your hand. Now I was trying some other builds before with maxed out triple trade-ins and using Herald of Creation and doing a whole bunch of stuff to get a lot of draw power, but the problem is when you build the deck with a whole bunch of draw power, when you're only using the cards that come out of the structure deck, you can't draw into, the cards like Dark Hole or, cards to really allow you to OTK your opponent, simply because this is not a Chaos Dragon deck, and like I said, we're only using cards out of the structure deck. So, adding the Blue Eyes isn't going to be too good, so most of the time, you're going to be adding Alexander Dragon, or if you happen to need this for maybe a Cards of Consonants, you have options for that as well. Next up, 1 Honest, probably one of the best cards in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I still can't believe this card is legal, and eventually I think it might get hit, but this card is very annoying to deal with. Basically, when anything attacks your light monster, you drop this, and now you've won the battle, unless, they happen to have some other effect to negate Honest or something like that. Next up, we have 3 Maiden with the Eyes of Blue. It should have been Blue Eyes Maiden, but anyways, they decided to change the name, and she's basically what runs the deck. Basically, when they attack her, you negate the attack, move her to defense position, and you special summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon from your deck with, little to no, negative effect on Blue Eyes Maiden. This is an insane effect. You can technically special summon it from the hand or graveyard, but more than likely, you want to special summon it out of your deck, because you usually don't want to draw the Blue Eyes, but I have 1 card in here, trade in, to actually get rid of a Blue Eyes if you happen to draw one. Next up, we have 1 Mirage Dragon, just because there's not really anything else in this deck that's actually, that viable to just normal summon. Mirage Dragon's an okay card. Maybe, your opponent sets a Mirror Force or something. You can add it back with this card if this card survives or something like that. Hey, it's not bad, it's just there, and it prevents your opponent from using trap cards during the battle phase. So that stops, a lot of really good cards, Dimensional Prison, Mirror Force, a lot of other, cards that some people do play. Next up, I decided to go with 2 Rider of the Stormwinds. It's another card you can technically use with Cards of Consonants. I decided not to make the deck turbo because, like I said, you can't draw into anything in this deck, which really allows you to throw a whole bunch of monsters on board really quickly. So I decided I'll just go with mediocre draw power and just make the deck kind of playable and kind of a slower pace. I mean, pretty much you'll get Blue Eyes out within I'd say 3 turns minimum is what you need. Sometimes if you happen to have a bad hand. But yeah, within 3 turns you should be able to get out Blue Eyes. And then what you want to do is basically protect Blue Eyes. Now unfortunately, Blue Eyes can still be, banished and all that other good stuff. But if a monster equipped with this card will be destroyed, you destroy this card instead. So he's kind of like a Union monster, if any of you guys know Union monsters. Basically, so you can, I'll just read his effect, it'll probably be easier for you guys. So you can target 1 Dragon-type monster, Dragon-type normal monster you control, and you equip this monster from your hand or your side of the field to that target. And then if the monster attacks a defense position monster, you inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent, which basically means if your opponent happens to have 0 defense, you inflict whatever amount of damage you would have. Let's say Blue Eyes attacks a monster that has 0 defense. Instead of them taking 0 damage, they would now take 3,000 damage. That is what piercing battle damage is. And then if a monster equipped with this card would be destroyed, you get to destroy this card instead. So that effect, unfortunately, against a lot of the higher tier decks doesn't really matter, because most of the higher tier decks will either banish your Blue Eyes or they will be taking control over it. So watch out for that. But this card is not really really that bad, and it technically is another tuner, so you can use cards of constants like I mentioned earlier, or you can actually synchro for the Azure Eyes Silver Dragon. But yeah, he's not the greatest card by all means, but like I said, we're working with, some limited cards here. Next up, we have 3 Shining Angel. This card is fantastic because it lets you get a quick Maiden with the Eyes of Blue, or better yet, get back Honest and, put Honest back to your hand. Very good effect that Honest has. Remember, you can return them to your hand. So yeah, Shining Angel is a fantastic card. Plus, sometimes if you happen to go Shining Angel into something like White Sun of Legend, you can use enemy controller, tribute the White Sun of Legend, then you get to add a Blue Eyes, and maybe you have trade, and you can do a lot of combos with Shining Angel. He's basically what starts in he basically initiates some of your combos in the deck, and he's a really great card in the deck as well. Next up, a Wingbeat of Giant Dragon. So you return basically Blue Eyes to your hand, and then you get to destroy all spell and trap cards on the field. So if your opponent is playing a trap heavy deck, and maybe they happen to have something like Gravity Bind or a whole bunch of others, maybe Level Limit Area B, which is getting really annoying, you can technically return, one of them to your hand, and then you get to blow up all of them. What you can also do with this card is actually go for something like the Azure Eyes Silver Dragon, which actually allows you to normal summon, or special summon a normal dragon-type monster from your... Oh, actually, it's just one normal monster in your graveyard, and you special summon it. So you can get back a Blue Eyes, and then perhaps return Blue Eyes to your hand, and then, get rid of everything, and then maybe get rid of Blue Eyes, and then simply get it back, because this card, it's once per turn during your standby phase, you can target a normal monster, so you can keep on abusing it. If you want to, you can definitely play more of this card, but I think 1 is enough. Generally don't want to return your Blue Eyes because it's not going to be doing too much in your hand. Then I decided to go with 1 Burst Stream of Destruction, so you just got to control Blue Eyes and you destroy all monsters your opponent controls, and I figured it might be viable maybe they happen to have a Marshmelon, because I figured this deck would have kind of some trouble against a monster that can't be destroyed by battle, so I was like, okay, well this card is okay, he does the piercing damage, and you also happen to have Burst Stream of Destruction. Perhaps if they happen to get a monster that can't be destroyed by battle, this card will be available for you. Next up, 1 card of constants. You have, I believe I'm running 6 targets for it, which are the 2 Flammable Guards, the 2 White Stone of Legends, and the 2 Rider of the Stormwinds. Next up, 3 enemy controller. Like I mentioned before, you can tribute this. It's really good. Sometimes you have a bad hand. Maybe your opponent only happens to have a very low amount of life points. You can summon whatever monster you have, enemy controller, take their monster, and attack them for a game. That's a really good way to do it. Next up, 1 for 1. This card is fantastic in this deck because, simply because this deck doesn't really, especially when we're just working with, the cards out of the structure deck, there's not many, combos that you can do to, really push for a lot of damage. 1 for 1 technically can push for a lot of damage if you happen to have the right cards. Like you can target the right card with this, and you can get out of Blue Eyes. Maybe you can push for a decent amount of damage, but it's kind of difficult in this deck to, OTK off of like a blank board. Next up, we have 3 Silver's Cry. Now this card lets you put a lot of damage on board. Sometimes you can OTK with it if you already happen to have maybe a Blue Eyes. So you get to target 1 Dragon-type normal monster in your graveyard, and you get to special them that target. Now keep in mind, it is a quick play, so that means you can set it, and then when your opponent ends his turn, you can activate it, and then you get a Blue Eyes out, and then maybe on your turn you can activate another one of these. That way you would have 2 Blue Eyes out, and you could push for a lot of damage potentially. Next up, 2 Stampeding Destructions. So this is basically your form of MST, I guess you could say, although it's not quick play. But you get to just target 1 spell trap card on the field and you destroy it. And then if you destroy your opponent's, they take 500. And if you destroy your own, then yeah, you would be taking 500. But there are times where you would actually want to destroy your own, which we'll get into a little bit later. Next up, just 1 trade. And I figure, if you draw the Blue Eyes, you happen to, add to your hand or whatever. It's just there, to be able to use. It's not that bad. Next up, 2 Castle of Dragon Souls. Now this card you can definitely play at 3 if you wanted to, but I wanted to add, this card in here because I thought this card was kind of cool. Anyways, Castle of Dragon Souls. So once per turn, you can banish 1 dragon-type monster from your graveyard, and then you target 1 monster you control. Keep in mind, you target this card that targets it. So then you could be getting out that Blue Eyes. So you get a target, and then it gains 700 attack until the end phase, and then when this face-up card leaves the field and is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 of your banished Dragon-type monsters and special summon that target. So that means maybe if your Blue Eyes gets banished, hey, you can definitely make use of this. Now your opponent probably won't be destroying this card at all, so yeah, that's where the Stampeding Destruction comes in. If you really need to push for damage, maybe you can make a game by just destroying your own card, then you can special summon a Blue Eyes. Hey, that's an option as well. But generally your opponent won't get rid of this card. when it is face up on the field. Next up, 1 Compulse. This is a fantastic card. Unfortunately, it is at 1. Otherwise, I would recommend you guys play 3. Next up, Triple Fiendish Chain. This card is so good in the game, and pretty much hurts every deck, except for like Chainburn or something awkward like that. This card pretty much does hit like every deck, and even in Chainburn, you get to target 1 monster on the field, so that could be your own monster. So maybe your opponent gives you a Lava Golem. Maybe you can Fiendish Chain that. Hey, that's an option for you. So yeah, Fiendish Chain is really good. It's basically like your only like real trap, other than like enemy controller can kind of be considered a trap because it's quick play and all that other good stuff. So this card, you get to take your opponent's monsters and just move a monster to defense position. A lot of meta cards, like cards that people use, are going to have relatively low defense if they have high attack. That's just something that goes along with Yu-Gi-Oh! Other than like Doom Caliber Knight, he has like ridiculous attack and defense for a monster that you can just straight up normal summon, but that card's not too meta anyways, so you won't have to worry about Doom Caliber Knight. But yeah, this card is just a fantastic card too. But don't worry about Doom Cal, because Alexander Dragon can get rid of it anyways also. But next up, I figured, why not play Kunai with Chain? It's kind of a really old card, and I remember for the Game Boy game, I really loved this card. The card was a really awesome, card. So activate 1 or both of these effects simultaneously. So when your opponent monster declares an attack, you get to move it to defense position, and then you can also target 1 face-up monster you control, and then you equip it to it, and it gains 500 attack. So hey, that is not bad at all. It's just for a small little boost in attack, or just move him to defense position, kind of like enemy control. I thought it was a really cool card, but like I mentioned, you can definitely play another one of these instead if you wish. This card is not bad at all. Now, there are other cards I figured that we could, definitely mention. That are okay. Let's see, we kind of went over most of these, but this is a card I didn't go over, simply because the way that this deck is kind of built is, you really need to add cards, from, different booster packs or different structure decks, or just cards from friends that, or cards that you can get from friends or something like that. Now, unfortunately, with Dragon Shrine, because there's no, real Call of the Haunted, I guess this could be argued that you can bring back a monster, but there's no really, Call of the Haunted. You can technically argue, yeah, Silver Cry is there also, but, this card, I don't really like it that much, simply because, let me read what it does first. So you send 1 Dragon type monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then if it was a normal monster, you can send 1 more. So that basically just means send your Blue Eyes to the graveyard. And how good is that? It's okay if you happen to have Silver Cry, but that's 2 cards to get out 1. Even though it is a 3,000 beater, it's not worth it, because trust me, you can get out Blue Eyes pretty darn easy, and you can add to your hand. You can get rid of it. So it's not that hard to get Blue Eyes in the graveyard, realistically, especially when you have 3 Shining Angels to bring out Maiden. It's not so bad. If you want to, you can play more card of Consonance, more trade-ins, more cards to add back the Blue Eyes, so you abuse, the amount of draw power you can technically get. But one problem I had when I was playtesting, I made a turbo variant, and it was not very good, simply because you would draw into a whole bunch of cards that would just draw you more cards, and then you wouldn't have anything to, attack with. You would have a whole bunch of draw power, maybe like a Blue Eyes, but I think it's much better to have some other traps. This card is a fantastic card as well, just to be able to, survive, simply because, having all the draw power is good if the deck can, push for a lot of damage and technically OTK. And I would say this deck, yeah, with Silver's Cry, and if you already have a Blue Eyes on the field, and there's one in the grave you can get back with Silver Cries, yeah, you can push for a decent amount of damage, and you might be able to OTK your opponent if you have, a whole bunch of stuff on board. But generally, it is not a deck where you can sit there and draw a bunch of cards and then OTK your opponent simply with nothing on the field. But as far as the extra deck, which I forgot to mention, it's just 3 Azure Eyes Silver Dragon. There's really nothing else you can put, because remember, we're only using 3 of the structure decks because that is what a lot of you guys requested me to do, and I deliver for you guys. So this card, which we'll briefly go over its effect, we might as well. So when it's special summon, Dragon type monsters you control cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects until the end of the next turn, which is actually a pretty darn good effect. And then once per turn, we already talked about it, but during your standby phase, you can target 1 normal monster in your graveyard, and you get to special summon target. Majority of the time, that does mean it is going to be Blue Eyes, but remember, that can mean Flame Guard, and that means you can make more Azure Eyes Silver Dragons, and then make more Azure Eyes Silver Dragons to make more of them, and then eventually, if your opponent has something that gets rid of them. But remember, when it's special summoned, until the end of the next turn, your opponent can't really do anything to them, which is really awesome. But yeah, just keep in mind, you might still can get Mirror Force, unless you have this card, Mirage Dragon, but you can't get that out with this, because this only lets you get normal monsters. But nonetheless, it's a pretty fun deck, and I hope you guys have some fun playing, with 3 of the structure decks. Maybe one day we'll do a duel where we only use structure decks, simply just cards out of the structure decks, and you're not allowed to use any cards out of it, because it'll be kind of fun. But like I said, a lot of players did request me to make this, so this is going to be the deck profile for the Blue Eyes, the Saga of Blue Eyes White Dragon structure deck, only using cards out of the structure deck. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. Asian Eyes signing out.